Real estate negotiation is the art of guiding buyers and sellers towards mutually beneficial terms. We have to use psychology, strategy, and above all, market insight and understanding. Great negotiators don't just haggle, they protect their clients, they are knowledgeable of their clients' interests, they're able to diffuse tension, and they can structure deals that stick. What we're going to talk about today are some of the most effective negotiating strategies that I have used, that I have learned. For any of you that have been in my office, I enjoy the art of the conversation, the art of the back and forth, the battle. For you to be able to utilize tactics when you set the stage to communicate towards impact, to secure win-win outcomes, you need to make sure that you have well-planned, executable action items and easily be able to adapt to your next conversation. So let's dive in a little bit. First strategy, I like to set realistic expectations. During negotiations, one of the most effective things that I tend to do is a combination of managing expectations and practicing discretion. For my buyers, especially, I like to run through the scenario so we can anticipate the seller's next move. What is our next conversation going to be? What's the next stage in the process from contract to close that I need to be focused on, because that's what they're going to be focused on. I need to be able to stay one step ahead in negotiation. I keep the details about my buyer and seller to a minimum. This is going to avoid tipping our hand, and it's going to stop us from being biased about the property. Similarly, as a listing agent for my sellers, I prepare them for the reality of lower than expected offer, um, potential inspection issues, shifting market items. You got to include these considerations from a net sheet conversation all the way into what's realistic. This way, both sides are equipped for twists and turns in the negotiating process, and it's going to lead to more successful outcomes for all parties involved. One of the fastest ways to lose a deal is to set unrealistic expectations, things that cannot be met. When buyers and sellers know what to expect, they're less likely to panic. You have given them examples of a best case and a worst case scenario, and you have told them that you're not going to be either of them. You are going to end up somewhere in the middle if we communicate effectively. When buyers and sellers know what to expect, they're less likely to panic, they're less likely to be emotional, or even reject a good offer because something doesn't feel right. Um, Worst thing in the world is to have a client that is the expert at the table. That's your job. And if you haven't secured your role when working with your clients, this is the first thing that's going to blow up in your face. I do use the phrasing with my agents. Client, you are the boss. You make final decision. However, I don't bring every single piece of the puzzle to the boss to make a decision upon. My job is to bring escalations and final decisions to the boss. The little back and forths that happen all day long, the way I set the stage, the way I work the environment, that's the art of the battle. That's all done behind the scenes. And I do have some clients that have been critical of not being involved enough in my history in real estate. I have actually had clients that come back to work with me again, but have told me flat out, I wish I was more involved in every single piece of the puzzle that Alex was involved in, because I feel like he controlled more of the deal than I did. When they work with me that second time after feeding that to me, they find out that the constant conversation that is necessary, the I need you to be able to respond to text messages faster, the I'm needing you for decisions and you're too busy worrying about whether or not you're going to wear a black shirt to the showing, uh, sets the differentiator on how I work with that client in the future. And typically they come back to me at the end of that next deal with, okay, you win. That was exhausting. And it taints the process, honestly. My job is to make sure that it is a smooth execution from end to end, to where my client is so excited most of the time of the next step that I have prepared them for, that if they don't hear from me for a couple of days, it's okay. They're still driving on that emotional run. Uh, another conversation that happens quite often is when I am with a client that is incredibly numbers based. I deal with this a lot with my international clients. They tend to fixate more on the net, the battle between every single dollar, where that dollar will translate to an investment down the road. So this is when you base your negotiation on market value and not just asking price. So my strategy when I calculate the value of a property, rather than the asking price, this ends up being my starting point for negotiation, not where they listed it at. It requires sometimes an offer above the market value in a hot market to get a home under contract. Many of your clients are going to want a lowball. Making an offer like that will typically never be accepted. And if you're too low, you run them away from the negotiating table at all. You won't even get a pound sand response from them. They will simply never respond to you again, thinking that you're one of these traditional lowball investors, that you're just trying to capitalize on a situation that is unknown about the seller, and they think they'll expose it with $100,000 below asking price. I advise against this. Even though I do supply this as a service to some of my clients, that is not the way I like to operate. It doesn't reveal anything about a seller's position. It doesn't keep them at the table. Offer, if you're going to come in lower and you need to come in lower, offer just below the minimum so the seller's willing to either accept it, or best case scenario, stay at the damn table and keep negotiating with us. If not, we're going to be forced to counter and counter aggressively just to keep strong buyers and sellers working together. The analogy I like to use on this one is strictly tennis. I grew up in a family that really enjoyed the tennis sport. My dad spent some time doing some tennis instructing while we were traveling when I was growing up, and it made an impact on not just how we played the game, but the art of being on the defending or the strategic side of the net. Um, I can tell you many games where simply my dad being able to have a very strong service of the initial sport would stop the game right there. He knew he could predict what my next move would be, and because of it, he could put in a power serve right at my feet, knowing that because of how I moved on the court, I wouldn't be able to counter at all. So the back and forth between tennis is great. It's a perfect analogy for how that strategy works. It is about the first service. And that first service is either going to get the ball in play, or it's going to destroy the opponent right out of the gate. So be strategic. The object of the game is to keep the ball moving back and forth. You never want to stalemate either side of the negotiation before a contract is accepted. Relying on the asking price alone, by the way, is incredibly risky. And if you have set your seller up for that expectation, here's our list price, this is what we're sticking to, you have absolutely failed them, especially in a shifting and a competitive market. See, Florida has plenty of homes for sale, but we have a very low percentage of turnkey ready homes for sale. homes that I would buy it and move directly into it and ready to go. Homes that I would consider, wow, this is a beautiful house. They don't make houses like this anymore. The houses they're making now are fast and furious, and as fast as they can dump them out of the bottom of the cereal box so that they can get to the prize, the better. A beautifully crafted resale home that has stood some of the tests of time, 10, 15, 20 years old and older. Yeah, that's a fantastic find. And if you can find one that doesn't need anything more than some makeup to make it beautiful again, absolutely worth it. Serious negotiators in a market like that will anchor an offer in a data backed property value, not emotional, not wishful. You need to know what the property is truly worth. It'll help you craft a very realistic offer, and it helps put pressure on the other side to respond strategically, not defensively. Another thing I am guilty of doing is keeping records of my fellow agents in my CRM. Listing agents have very different negotiating styles. It is crucial for you to keep notes on each listing agent, and not just the agent, but the agency that they work with. You will be able to adopt and adapt to their working style when you do the next deal with them, or again, with their broker and their organization. If they prefer phone calls over text, where are they responsive? How long does it take them to reply to emails? Is all useful data necessary for you to communicate with them? Do they like doing every piece of paperwork under the sun? Or do they like to do a lot of back and forth over text messaging and conversation, and then write up contracts and addendums based on the results? Negotiating doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're often working with the same types of agents and the same agents from the same agencies, especially in important areas, again and again. Keeping detailed notes on these folks, saving your text messages so when they come up in your phone again, you know how the last deal went. You could follow that same strategy to a fault. You can actually follow the same strategy with an agent you worked with before, and then when they least expect it, because they assume you're going to play ball the same way, you can pivot, and you can pivot quickly. It gives you a leg up every single time you're across from them at the table. And a few notes in your CRM will save you a lot of time, a lot of friction, and it'll help you negotiate a lot more effectively for your client. I also go in, especially with a new agent, and I like to know what their history has been. Not all encompassing, because the market consistently change. Sorry, agents, you're not going to like this part. But a really good agent during COVID isn't shit in today's market. They don't know how to negotiate because everything was above bar. They don't know how to plan accordingly because everything was about, how do I compete this offer? Very recently walked through a competitive bid, and we won the bid, not because of our pricing. We were not the cheapest price. We were not the strongest offer at the table. But what I did have was a relationship with the agent where I could honestly say, hey, you've worked with me before. My job is to make sure this is the right situation for both the buyer and the seller. Here's what my buyer needs for this to be successful. What does your seller need? Does your seller need speed to close? Does your seller need a larger cash deposit to feel more comfortable? Does your client need smaller inspection times? So if something goes wrong, they can get it back on the table, back on the market faster. Does your client need a financial affidavit so that they can see that not only are the finances good, but it won't be a bad money decision while we're working to get this client into a house? And believe me, what you offer and what happens at the end changes. And as long as you're communicating that properly, it works to your benefit. Arming yourself with that type of data will make for a much stronger negotiation for you. The adage in real estate when I was first taught was, It's about location, location, location. And when it comes to negotiation, it is data, data, data. Let the data drive your decisions, not just from the agent, but from the area, but from the properties itself, and from what the market is doing. If the market has an average back and forth of a 3% reduction in list price, then you should be leveraging that. You gather this information, you arm yourself for stronger negotiations. You're able to leverage and take advantage to make sure that you have the most information possible so that you are the smartest person at the table. And that doesn't mean you're the one talking all the time. Smartest person in the room is just the one that has the knowledge to get the deal closed. The person armed with the most information is most likely the one that's going to win the negotiation. You should have an understanding of the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If negotiations fall apart, what are the other options for your buyer or your seller? In a real estate negotiation, emotional arguments rarely win. Data does. Data does every time. Agents who walk into a negotiation with a solid grasp of the local comps, the market trends, alternative deal options, better equipped responses, then it's going to boil down to how do they handle pressure? How professional are their counter offers and how confident are they? How do they secure the best outcomes for their client? That ends up being the winning strategy for you. And then don't be afraid to use a framework in your negotiations. In many real estate programs, especially if you decided to get degreed in real estate, you might hear a concept called the 4 C's. It's easy to remember. It applies to just about every transaction. Starts with a checklist to make sure that you're hitting every single step in every single transaction, including follow-up for reviews once you've closed it for every single transaction. Then think about what your client can compromise on. Help them see what they have in common and where both sides aren't going to be willing to budge. You keep these things in mind and you keep this simple. Checklist, common interest, conflict, compromise. Let's talk about criteria. If you don't yet have a checklist or a process of how your transactions should move along, you're doing yourself a disservice. There are over a dozen steps minimum in every single transaction. And believe me, that's the 35,000 foot bullets. There are tons of sub steps underneath each one, but I will stay at the top layer for you. Make a checklist so that for every single deal, you can eliminate potential potholes that are going to slow things down. Know how you're going to step through each of those when they go sideways. Know how you handle every single one of these bullets. Common interest. Identify the mutual benefits. A small concession that can lead to a much smoother transaction, for example, for the other party. When we had the initial conversation, agent to agent, was time more important than the money? Was the price most important because the client hasn't been in the home for a long time and they need to be able to at least net zero and walk away from this property without a loss? Then we talked about conflicting interest. You must know where both sides will not budge. It helps you think strategically. It will allow you to move forward even through an obstacle. If a buyer's lease is up next month, but the seller isn't motivated to move, you're going to find it very tough to move things along. And then compromise. Your expertise in real estate is going to give you the authority to find a middle ground. Remember, you are the guide here. You are the master conductor in this symphony. Sometimes that $400 bathroom fan isn't worth losing the condo over. Help your buyer see the big picture. There's also some tactical communication techniques that you can put in play. The other one is the three P's: the push, pull, persist. For negotiations, push, pull, persist is very helpful for a lot of people, and also easy to remember. It helps you to have options in the discussions for progress or regress. For example, we push information, we push data, we push proactive help, understanding and listening. We persist relentlessly in our pursuit of getting the yes. And we can pull the yes, we can pull the deal away. I don't care whether you're selling $1 million house or $130 million house. The minute the buyer likes it, every agent runs to write the offer. Sometimes being the boldest is what pays off. The biggest successes for your client and your business. You've got to remember this is a negotiation. The one with the power is the one that truly will and can walk away. So we can sometimes use the pull in our strategies. This works with buyers and sellers in every single market, by the way. In addition, it's also good as a broker that you can demonstrate that you just don't want to rush every single deal to your client. You want the best deal for them. Again, it's not always the money. It could be the conditions and the terms of the closings. The T's and the C's may be what gets you there. It might be what makes the whole deal the most attractive. If your client doesn't care $10,000 one way or the other, and they just want to make sure the terms of moving or the terms of closing are handled their way, then that's what you need to focus on. So taking the deal away can be the most effective creation of urgency. I have a deal right now in Kissimmee, Florida. We received the offer. We have gone back and forth on counter offer. These are good clients. I consider them personal friends of mine, and it is driving them nuts that I have not beat the tom-toms and made sure that the buyer client stays on the phone with me all day, every day, beating them up, trying to get this deal done. Sometimes you just got to shut up, back up, wait. We have to be the ones in the control seat, and we have to allow the buyer to understand, hey, we know what our home is worth. We will help you get this deal done, but price in this particular instance, we just did a large price drop, is no longer negotiable. Other terms, let's talk about it. Let's make this a more valuable deal to you. So those three P's, it's going to give you, it's going to take the deal away, so it creates that nice urgency for getting the deal done. Your relationships with your clients, they will appreciate it when you get to the finish line. This is a little more complicated strategy from the client seat, but believe me, when it comes to the art of the decision, being able to shift that power dynamic and still keep momentum, yeah, absolutely, incredible gold star for agents that can accomplish this. The agent benefit is it gives your seller's agent a framework to create that sense of urgency inside the deal too, while managing multiple offers and strategies, and creates a single strength without appearing desperate. And speaking of desperation, you got to keep your emotions in check. You've got to be cool headed. Cool hand Luke is the one that you want to model in this one. Emotions, especially anger, it's a true weakness at the negotiating table. And if you can find a poker face, buying and selling real estate is going to be easy for you. Stop whining, stop bitching, stop pouting. Don't curse in the deal. Don't get angry. Don't pace around. And don't storm out of the room or storm off the call. Things simply happen. If you want to become a stronger negotiator, you have got to learn how to keep your poker face. No matter what the other side is going to throw at you, you maintain stability. Not everyone is as respectful as they should be, by the way. Know this going in and prepare yourself to let other people's emotions Just roll off the back, smile, and understand it's part of the job. You are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that are on the line with this investment, with this sale, and with this purchase. Understand it's not going to be smooth sailing most of the time. Keeping a cool head, by the way, is also going to protect the deal. Even when the clients, agents, or offers get heated, the stronger negotiators are able to control every facet of the emotion in the movement, redirects the pressure proactively, be a diffuser of the drama before it spirals. In tense moments, silence and slowing the pace can be a lot more powerful than reacting to the moment. Sometimes the explosion is simply waiting for a response so it knows where to plant the next charge. Sometimes just shutting up, backing up, and allowing the other person to struggle in the silence is the optimum move. Intense moments, I'm telling you, you being able to slow the pace and control the emotional stance of the conversation will be a lot more powerful than your expected reaction. Believe me, it will help you maintain the leverage. A client trust during an emotional or high stakes decision will go a lot further with you. Which kind of circles me back to handle these emotional states and handle these negotiations by phone or in person before you commit anything to paper. The paper simply clouds things around. And we just recently dealt with a client that was at the closing table. I want to say the seller was signing off, and there was an expectation. Pardon my scratching my nose. There was an expectation by the seller that they were paying certain fees based on the decisions they made in the contract, and the contract was not written or signed or agreed to that way. It doesn't mean that you have to hard boil that egg and make absolutely sure that that's it. Terms of the contract, that's what we're doing. At the end of the day, we were talking about $320 that the seller expected they weren't paying a title company. Not even a point of contingency with the negotiation, just a fee that was coming from a title company that they didn't expect that they had to pay, and it made them angry that the title company wouldn't even entertain their conversation, wouldn't even acquiesce that, hey, maybe you had a misunderstanding or something. They would have gotten over it. Truly, I could have just stayed quiet when the title company brought it to my attention, and I could have said, I'm sorry, that's the way the contract was written. If we need to delay the closing for a day, then let me know so that you can think this through. Again, just over $300 to a $700,000 plus home sale for them so that they could move up north and complete the deal. Could not finalize their deal up north without closing this deal here in Florida. Agent to agent, I was open and I was honest. We're not going to lose this deal over $300. We're just not. I would like you, however, to call your client with the title company on the phone so that they have an education of what this fee is and where they, although they believed if they used a different title company, they wouldn't have had this fee, they would have gotten some other fee that replaced it. Title companies are the best at adding 50 fees into their statements that people simply don't understand what these fees go to. If you ever get a chance as an agent to sit through a title company class, credit hours or not, sit there and have them walk through a closing disclosure with you, really dig into a CD and figure out what it means so that when you're explaining these generalities to a client, you don't say, all these are fees, move on to the next section. No, you actually know what each line item is in a title company. And when you see title company A called a fee something, title company B called it something else, you'll be able to relate to it because it's going to be approximately the same cost. And you'll be able to tell your client, hey, heads up, this is not a fee we can negotiate with the title company. Let's go talk to the buyer or the seller and see who's willing to pay for it. Ultimately, the buyer paid for it because the buyer was so happy and was so pleased with how cooperative the seller was. We got a great deal on the home already. We weren't looking to make another 300,000 on it. This client even bought furniture that was in the house because they loved the home. The owner actually took great pride in the home. The inspection went flawlessly, and things that we didn't even bicker about on the inspection, we said, here are some things that are going on with the house that when you lived in them, can you give us some advice on how these things should be repaired? They just repaired them. We didn't even ask, right? That type of relationship versus me throwing a demand for a request for repairs in their lap went very different. They were ecstatic on the way we, as the buyer side, handled them on the seller side. So being able to negotiate deal points over the phone and work through all of the liquidity of what these solutions are with a cooperating broker or agent becomes the tipping points, becomes the nuts and the bolts of the deal before it ever goes to paper. Counteroffer can get messy. It can take a lot of unnecessary back and forth. It's just paperwork. I have seen red lines that have come back and forth on a contract, and thank goodness for the time stamping mechanism. Otherwise, you wouldn't really know what the last signature was. There's so many initials. If you're negotiating with an agent over the phone, it's helpful to write up on the contract as you speak with them moving forward. I actually use Keystone Blue, by the way. I actually use blue folders for every single one of my deals, even though all of my deals are 100% transaction and they are paperless. I use, if there's a folder on my desk, there are actions that can be quickly grabbed and taken regardless of what I am doing on my computer. So I can very quickly open it up, and inside the folder, I am writing notes, and I write my notes in an order so I know how the negotiation went. What was a sticking point in each of those bullets? So when I have to come back to it and they say, hey, I thought we negotiated this fee out. No, what we negotiated on Saturday at 3 o'clock was this. This does not include that fee. However, I want to talk to my clients and see if they would be willing to pay it or maybe split it with you. It is so helpful to write these things down. And the way my brain works, sorry, I'm an old school guy. So for me, the way I studied even as a kid, I was taught to read it, write down and take my notes about it, and then go back and read my notes. And that's what created context for me to be able to leverage later on. And believe me, I can grab any folder going back all through my history in real estate, and I can open my notes and know exactly how this deal went, which is critical. When I'm coming back to that client again, 7 years down the road, when they're ready to sell that property we bought together, I can tell you exactly how we strategize this close and can remind them, hey, by the way, you bought this house with me. I know what we did to get this house. I also know what was wrong with it and what we did and didn't have repaired when we bought it. Did you do any of these repairs in the last 7 years? Did you ever get the roof redone? You were willing to negotiate that out. Did you ever expend the cost to put a new roof on this property? Because now we're at an end of life situation and it's going to cost us money to get out of this home. These are all things that you need to figure out how, if I, as your broker, walk into the room and say, I need you to walk me through this deal that happened 8 months ago from start to finish, you better be able to do it. It may be the difference between me responding to an accusation over an email or me having to actually go sit in court at the FREC and represent you. Live conversations and goodness, if you've got a video opportunity like Zoom or like Microsoft Teams or anything like that, this will offer far more insight than a bunch of emails and text. It allows for tone, it allows for urgency. Subtle hesitations often get lost in digital messaging. taking it out early so you can clarifying your goals, reduce miscommunication, avoid drawn out counteroffer changes. And if you are smart enough to record each of these and then have an AI engine or an AI assistant built in that will actually summarize everything for you, and then you can send the summary back to the client, kudos. Freaking kudos. Because now you're letting the technology do the work that used to take you so much time that you probably didn't do in the first place that you should have. This will speed up negotiations for you. This will reduce misunderstanding. It will also create a stronger agent to agent rapport. And I can tell you, if you go look at my site, I have just as many agent compliments back to me in my Google review page as I do clients. I am a pleasure to work with, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get bowled over. Some other paper strategies that can be used. Escalation clause is making a nice comeback. Not that we are in a state of high competition, but if you submit an escalation clause to the seller that you think his home should be a competitive negotiation, trust me, you will set a different stage between you and this seller's transaction. The agent will call you with shock and awe. Hey, I'm sorry. Did I tell you we had multiple contracts on the table? Well, we assume that you do. So there's our escalation clause. Well, are you willing to negotiate to the top of your escalation clause now? No, not without a competing offer. And they just exposed to you that they don't. You opened the table for them and in a way that they weren't expecting it. An escalation clause, listen, is a great way to give your client the best chance of winning a multiple offer situation. Do not underestimate the power of this tool. There is specific language you can use for these counter offers. I insist that you make absolutely sure that you put it in smaller increments of growth above the competing offer, up to a renegotiable gap, a milestone where up to $10,000, and then let's renegotiate. And we're willing to negotiate further. If you are truly in a bidding war, these escalation clauses will give buyers a much more competitive edge. This keeps you from immediately maxing out their budget. Clauses like this will show intent to win while leaving the room for financial protection. Sometimes the buyer is going to appreciate and the listing agent respects how this art of the negotiation works. Just be sure to run the language by your managing broker. Local norms and your legal best practices in the state you are practicing real estate are critical to how those phrasings work. And believe me, it will help win multiple offer situations without overcommitting financially, like going back and doing just a traditional counteroffer would do. And then I want to wrap up today with this final strategy. I want you to start negotiating in a win-win perspective. New agents, I'm talking to you. New agents make a huge mistake of starting every negotiation as if they are going into war. And if you are negotiating with me on the other side of the table, you have years of experience. I have books older than you on my shelf, typically. And I am running old school negotiations by you under a new community standard that you haven't even experienced yet. Not only am I going to get annoyed with you, but you're likely never going to work with me again. I can actually hurt your client's interest too if I don't walk in there with the right perspective. Instead, I'm leaning in on who the agent is versus what's the best back and forth for the two clients. So I want you to negotiate understanding that you, new agent, need to know what is your client's expectation and what is your client's need. and you need to meet the need, not necessarily the price, not necessarily the timing, not necessarily the term or the condition. Meet the need of your client. Learn to focus on a solution, by the way, instead of turning everything into some type of adversarial crisis. Your client and the fellow agent you're working with will thank you. And again, I've been a broker longer than most of you have been agents. So for me, I have looked you up. I've seen how many deals you've done. I have seen how you did deals in different markets. And I am seeing in a very complex and a slower market, a more traditional market that has more give and take on both sides of the transaction, I can tell immediately if you have no experience in this type of market, I'm going to eat you alive. But good negotiation isn't about defeating the other side. I understand what my clients need. I am going to work with you to find common ground that serves your client as well as mine. If you'll just shut up and listen. Your job is not to beat me because you won't. I always have the power to walk away, and then you've lost. I want you to learn how to adopt that win win mindset. It's going to foster better collaboration for you. You'll be able to build goodwill between agents and between buyer and seller. You're often going to lead to incredibly smooth closings, and that's what they are going to remember. They're going to remember the cruise and how smooth the boat was on the water, so they didn't have to focus on the boat ride. They got to enjoy the entertainment while on the trip. This is also going to open the door to future transactions with some agents. This is a huge advantage when you're tightening in a connected market. So, agents, I want you to concentrate on building a better working relationship with other agents. Reduce the friction. This is going to lead to longer and better term outcomes for you. And I believe you will enjoy this industry a lot more. For those of you that are out there doing good business, and yes, I am talking to the same 10% that I am always talking to, because out of 100% of all of these agents, 10% of the agents in the state of Florida and in all other 49 states are doing the majority of the business. So for you 10 percenters that are out there, keep up the great work. For the other 90%, you can do this. This isn't difficult. Finding the leads is harder. Finding the right house is harder. But if you take your time and you actually cruise through and treat every transaction as it deserves, instead of trying to speed through this like a home builder today, building a new house, you will build a better practice for yourself. You will be able to live in peace while you are doing this very complex negotiating work. And if you want to buddy up, have somebody help you and mentor you through these processes, call me. Call us here at Keystone. We're happy to help you out. Have a great weekend, everybody. For those of you just coming off of the Halloween parties from last night, hope you had a good time and had a safe time. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk soon. Bye-bye now.